"You don't belong here, Sergeant. Pack your things."
They told her to leave Marine Sniper School. Too slow, too quiet, not aggressive enough. She didn't argue. She just walked to the 1,300-meter range and fired 3 shots that no one else had even dared attempt. Then they saw it. Her personal rifle wasn't standard issue. It was carved with death, coordinates, confirmed kills, continents. At the bottom, a single name etched into steel: Operation Omega Wind. Master Sergeant Dalton went pale, and suddenly the ghost they dismissed became the Marine they feared. Because some weapons don't fire bullets, they carry history. You're watching Veteran Biker. We know you're here. Drop a 1 if you're new, or 2 if you've been with us. Like, subscribe, and prepare to be humbled. The air at Fort Eden was a crucible, thick with the scent of gunpowder, sweat, and ambition. For Sergeant Scarlett Donner, however, it felt less like a proving ground and more like a slow, deliberate suffocation. She stood rigidly at attention, her M24 SWS rifle slung across her back, its familiar weight a cold comfort against the gnawing anxiety that had become her constant companion. Around her, the other candidates for the Army Sniper Instructor course bristled with an overt aggression, a competitive fire that seemed to burn brighter with each passing day. Scarlett, with her quiet demeanor and almost unnerving stillness, was an anomaly. "Dora!" The shout ripped through the morning chill, courtesy of Master Sergeant Dalton, a man whose voice could strip paint and whose gaze could bore holes through concrete. He was a veteran of countless deployments, his face a roadmap of scars and sun-baked lines, his reputation as a no-nonsense, unforgiving instructor preceding him like a thunderclap. Today, his voice held a particular edge, a blend of frustration and thinly veiled contempt. Scarlett snapped her head to the left, her eyes the color of a winter sky, locking onto Dalton's. She offered no flinch, no visible reaction, just an unyielding, almost passive acknowledgement. This, in itself, seemed to irritate Dalton further. "Report!" he barked, his boots crunching on the gravel as he strode closer, his shadow falling over her like a shroud. "Sergeant Donner reporting. Master Sergeant," she replied, her voice even, devoid of inflection. It was the same voice that had, for weeks, failed to convey the aggression and urgency the instructors relentlessly demanded. Dalton stopped inches from her, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee and frustration washing over her face. "Donner, we've had our eye on you. For weeks. And frankly, we're not seeing it." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, a heavy indictment. "You're too quiet, too reserved. This isn't a library, Sergeant. This is a sniper course. It demands initiative, it demands a killer instinct, and you, Donner, just don't have it." The words were a familiar refrain. Not aggressive enough, too slow, not one of us. They had been whispered in mess halls, shouted on the range, scribbled on her evaluation forms like a recurring nightmare. Each day, Scarlett had tried to adjust, to force herself into the mold they so desperately wanted her to fit. She had pushed herself physically, mastering every drill, every obstacle course, every theoretical concept. Her scores on target acquisition, windage calculations, and camouflage were consistently among the highest in the cohort, but the intangible, the killer instinct, remained elusive in their eyes. Dalton gestured vaguely towards the expansive, sun-drenched firing range where other candidates were already executing rapid-fire drills, the staccato rhythm of their shots a testament to their perceived readiness. "Look around you, Donner. See that fire? That drive? You lack it. You move like a ghost, yes, but not a predator, more like a shadow." He spat the last word out as if it were a bitter taste in his mouth. Scarlett remained silent. What was there to say? To argue would be to betray the very essence of her training, to reveal a hidden strength that in this environment would be utterly misunderstood. Her strength was not in overt aggression, but in an almost supernatural patience, a profound stillness that allowed her to blend seamlessly into her surroundings, to become one with the environment until she was, in essence, invisible. This was a concept utterly alien to the Fort Eden curriculum, which favored overt displays of dominance and speed. "You're not responding, Sergeant," Dalton pressed, his eyes narrowing, searching for a crack in her impassive facade. No excuses, no protests. "No, Master Sergeant," Scarlett replied, her gaze steady. "I understand the parameters of the course." Dalton let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his closely cropped hair. "Right. Well, that makes this easier then, doesn't it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Your evaluation is complete. As of 0900 hours, Sergeant Donner, you are formally withdrawn from the Army Sniper Instructor course. You're to report to supply to turn in your gear, then process out through administrative. Clean out your bunk. You're done." The words, though anticipated, still hit with the blunt force of a physical blow. A faint tremor ran through Scarlett, barely perceptible. It wasn't despair, but a quiet, almost melancholic acceptance. She had known deep down that this was inevitable. Her unique skill set, honed in the shadows, was simply not designed for the spotlight of Fort Eden. "Understood, Master Sergeant," she stated, her voice still level, betraying none of the turmoil within. She saluted crisply, her hand a perfect, unmoving slab against her brow. Dalton returned the salute, his expression still a mixture of disappointment and relief. "Dismissed, Sergeant." Scarlett executed a sharp about-face and began to walk away, her boots kicking up small puffs of dust with each step. Her stride was even, her shoulders back, betraying nothing of the internal storm. She didn't look back, there was no point. The walk to her bunk was a short one, yet it felt like a march across a vast, desolate landscape. The barracks, usually bustling with the camaraderie and tension of the candidates, felt eerily quiet. Most were out on the range, immersed in the very drills she was now forbidden to participate in. Inside, her small Spartan bunk was exactly as she had left it. A neatly made bed, a footlocker at its base, and her personal rifle, meticulously cleaned and maintained, propped carefully in its stand beside the wall. This M24 was not standard issue for the course. It was her personal weapon, modified and calibrated to her exacting specifications. It was an extension of herself, a silent partner in countless unseen missions. She began to pack. Each item was folded with precision, placed carefully into her duffel bag, her combat fatigues, her field gear, her small personal effects, a worn photograph of a mountain range, a simple, unadorned silver locket. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a profound sense of closure. She had given it her best according to their rules. But their rules were not her rules, and her definition of best was something they simply could not comprehend. As she reached for her rifle, a familiar comfort, her fingers brushed against the cold metal of its scope mount. It was a habit, an almost unconscious gesture. But this time, her thumb caught on something, a series of faint, almost invisible etchings just beneath the mount, where the scope seamlessly met the barrel. They were not easily noticeable, deliberately obscured by the subtle wear and tear of years of use, almost a part of the rifle's natural texture. She paused, her breath hitching almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a conscious decision to look, but rather an instinct, a flicker of memory. Her fingers traced the lines, coordinates, latitude and longitude, precise to the decimal, each set meticulously carved into the metal, dozens of them. They spanned continents, arid desert landscapes, dense jungle canopies, snow-capped peaks. Each set of coordinates represented a single irrevocable act, a mission completed with surgical precision. And then, at the very end of the long, silent list, etched deeper, more pronounced than the others, was a single word. A word that, as Master Sergeant Dalton would soon discover, should not exist on any public record, on any unclassified rifle: Omega Wind. It was a code name, a spectral whisper from a past that was not meant for the light of day. A past that involved operations so clandestine, so sensitive, that their very existence was denied by the highest echelons of power. Operation Omega Wind was not merely a mission. It was the culmination of a decade of deep cover assignments, a series of almost mythical feats of precision and patience that had redefined the very concept of the long-range engagement. Scarlett's gaze lingered on the word for a moment, a fleeting shadow of a memory passing through her eyes. Then, with the same quiet efficiency with which she had packed everything else, she picked up the rifle. She intended to remove the scope and its mount, to meticulously clean the area, perhaps even to polish away the faint marks that spoke of her true history. It was a professional habit, a precaution she had always taken. She would store the scope separately, ready for reassembly, ready for the next unknown mission. Just as she began to unscrew the first retaining bolt on the scope mount, the barracks door creaked open. "Donner, you still in here?" Master Sergeant Dalton's voice, surprisingly softer now, echoed in the empty room. He had returned, perhaps to ensure she was complying with his orders, or perhaps in some small corner of his hard-bitten heart, to offer a final unspoken observation. Scarlett froze, her hand still on the rifle, her thumb resting directly over the Omega Wind etching. There was no time to conceal it. Dalton stepped fully into the bunk, his eyes sweeping across the room. He saw her duffel bag neatly packed, and then his gaze landed on Scarlett, her hands on her rifle. He approached, his stride slower, less confrontational than before. "Just making sure you're packing up," he said, his voice almost conversational. "Didn't want any misunderstandings." He stopped a few feet away, his eyes now fixed on the rifle in her hands. He noticed the way she held it, not like a tool, but like an extension of her own being. There was a reverence in her touch, a familiarity that spoke of countless hours, countless engagements. His eyes drifted to her hands, then to the area just beneath the scope mount. His brow furrowed slightly. He wasn't looking for etchings, not consciously. He was simply observing, a lifetime of military experience making him notice every detail. But then his gaze snagged on something, the faint, irregular lines. He leaned in, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "What's that there, Donner?" he asked, his voice losing some of its previous softness, replaced by a nascent suspicion. He reached out, his finger almost touching the metal. Scarlett didn't respond immediately. Her hand instinctively tightened around the rifle. Dalton's eyes sharpened. He saw the coordinates first, a jumble of numbers and letters, seemingly random, yet too precise, too uniform to be accidental. He was a sniper, an instructor. He knew what coordinates looked like. But these were extensive. And then his gaze locked onto the final, undeniable word: Omega Wind. The two words hit him like a thunderbolt. His face, usually tanned and weathered, drained of color, turning a sickly pale. His eyes, normally hard and unwavering, widened in a mixture of shock and dawning horror. He knew that name, not from official records, not from classified briefings he had ever been privy to, but from the hushed whispers. Among the truly elite, the whispers that spoke of phantoms and legends, of impossible shots taken in impossible circumstances. Omega Wind wasn't a mission, it was a myth, a ghost story told in hushed tones around campfires in Afghanistan and Iraq, a cautionary tale of a precision operative so far beyond the conventional understanding of sniper that she bordered on the supernatural. Dalton recoiled slightly, as if the rifle itself had burned him. His hand dropped, trembling. His eyes, still wide, darted from the etching to Scarlett's impassive face, then back to the rifle, as if trying to reconcile the two. The quiet, almost meek Sergeant Donner, who had just been dismissed for lacking aggression, was holding a rifle etched with the impossible. "No," he breathed, the word barely a whisper, a sound of profound disbelief. His mind raced, pulling disparate pieces of information together. The unwavering gaze, the almost inhuman patience, the consistent, flawless scores despite her lack of overt fire. It wasn't a lack of aggression. It was a different kind of aggression, a colder, more lethal precision born of absolute control. Scarlett, sensing the shift, the sudden seismic realization dawning on Dalton's face, simply closed her hand more firmly around the rifle. She offered no explanation, no denial, no affirmation. Her silence was more damning than any confession. Dalton took a step back, then another, his eyes never leaving the rifle. He looked utterly bewildered, as if he had just stumbled upon a secret that defied all logic, all training. He had dismissed her. He had called her not one of us. And now, he realized, she was us in a way he could barely comprehend, a level of us that existed in the shadows beyond his operational clearance. "Master Sergeant?" Scarlett's voice was soft, cutting through the sudden, suffocating silence. "Is there anything else?" Dalton swallowed hard, his throat dry. No, Donner, you're dismissed." His voice was barely audible, a stark contrast to his earlier booming commands. He was no longer the dominant instructor. He was a man utterly flummoxed, a veteran confronted with a truth that shattered his understanding of the world. He turned slowly, his movements almost robotic, and walked out of the bunk, leaving the door ajar. Scarlett watched him go, then glanced back at the rifle. She knew what this meant. The word Omega Wind was a tripwire. Once seen, it couldn't be unseen. The gears of a much larger, much more powerful machine had just begun to turn. She finished packing her rifle, placing it carefully into its hard case, the etchings now concealed from view. She then slung her duffel bag over her shoulder. She walked out of the barracks, past the silent, deserted parade grounds, and towards the administrative building. Her steps were deliberate, unhurried. There was no protest, no argument, just a quiet departure. But behind the scenes, far from the dusty training grounds of Fort Eden, a storm was indeed brewing. The red flag alert had just been triggered, screaming through secure channels, echoing in the hushed offices of the Joint Special Operations Command. A name, a legend, a ghost from the shadows had just been inadvertently revealed. And the world was about to realize that Sergeant Scarlett Donner was not leaving Fort Eden because she lacked skill. She was leaving because her true purpose was about to find her. The storm had begun. The administrative building at Fort Eden was a drab, utilitarian structure, all beige walls and fluorescent lighting, designed for function over form. It was the bureaucratic heart of the base, where careers were forged and, as Scarlett was currently experiencing, quietly ended. She sat on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, her duffel bag and rifle case beside her, the subtle hum of the air conditioning unit doing little to mask the clatter of keyboards and the hushed murmurs from behind frosted glass partitions. Her withdrawal papers lay on the counter, awaiting final signatures. The clerk, a young private first class with an overly enthusiastic mustache, seemed oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding before him. He was diligently shuffling papers, occasionally glancing at her with a fleeting expression that might have been pity or perhaps just boredom. Scarlett felt a strange sense of detachment. She was physically present, but her mind was already elsewhere, processing the implications of Dalton's discovery. The Omega wind etching was a beacon, a signal she hadn't intended to broadcast. She knew the protocols. Once such an identifier was sighted by unauthorized personnel, a chain reaction would inevitably follow. The silence from JSOC, or rather, the lack of immediate overt action, was more unsettling than any immediate confrontation. It suggested a delicate, high-stakes dance was already underway behind the scenes. She glanced at her watch. 10:15 a.m. Just over an hour had passed since Dalton's pale-faced departure from her bunk. An hour was more than enough time for a secure line to be established, for encrypted messages to fly, for high-level clearances to be checked and double-checked. The calm before the storm was almost palpable. Suddenly a voice cut through the monotonous drone of the office. "Sergeant Donner?" Scarlett looked up. It was the young PFC. "Your papers are almost ready. Just need one final signature from the commanding officer's aide." He gestured vaguely towards a closed door at the far end of the hall. "Shouldn't be long." She nodded, a silent acknowledgement. She had expected to be processed out swiftly, discreetly. The system, once it decided a candidate was unsuitable, was remarkably efficient in its expulsion. But as she sat there, a thought began to solidify in her mind, a whisper of defiance against the unspoken accusation of inadequacy. They had judged her based on their limited criteria, on a superficial understanding of what a sniper truly was. They had dismissed her as not aggressive enough, too slow. She had left without protest, fulfilling their expectations of a quiet, compliant exit. But what if she offered a final, uninvited demonstration, not of aggression but of precision, not of speed but of control, a silent rebuttal to their dismissal? It was a risk, an indulgence, but one that felt strangely necessary, a quiet reclaiming of her identity, if only for herself. Her gaze drifted to her rifle case. The M24, it called to her, a familiar weight, a promise of silent dialogue. The thought was audacious, perhaps even professionally imprudent, but it resonated deeply within her. She rose slowly, her movements unhurried. The PFC looked up, startled. "Sergeant, is everything all right?" "Yes, Private," Scarlett replied, her voice calm. "I just need to stretch my legs. I'll be back shortly." Before the PFC could object, she picked up her rifle case and duffel bag. She walked deliberately towards the exit, her steps firm and resolute. The PFC watched her go, a confused expression on his face, but offered no challenge. After all, she was already dismissed, essentially a civilian waiting for final paperwork. Instead of turning left towards the main gate, Scarlett turned right, heading towards the distant sound of gunfire that marked the larger, more expansive training ranges. She knew exactly which range she was aiming for, the 1,300-meter range, a distance considered challenging even for the most seasoned marksman at Fort Eden. It was often deserted, used only for specialized long-range drills or qualification attempts by the most elite instructors. The sun beat down, turning the dusty path into a shimmering mirage. She walked with purpose, the familiar weight of her gear a comforting burden. She passed smaller ranges where recruits were still practicing basic marksmanship, the air filled with the sharp crack of 5.56 rounds. She ignored the curious glances, her eyes fixed on the horizon, on the distant berms that marked the end of the 1,300-meter range. When she arrived, the range was indeed empty, a long, flat stretch of earth, dotted with various pop-up targets at different distances. The wind, a gentle but consistent crosswind, rustled through the sparse scrub brush, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and distant diesel. Scarlett found an empty firing point, well away from any potential interference. She set down her duffel bag. then unzipped her rifle case. With practiced ease, she assembled her M24, screwing the scope back onto its mount, checking the reticle, ensuring everything was perfectly aligned. Her movements were economical, fluid, born of years of muscle memory. There was no haste, only precision. She pulled out a small, worn notebook and a pencil from a pocket in her rifle case. Inside were her personal data sheets, meticulously recorded ballistic information for her specific rifle, ammunition, and various environmental conditions. She cross-referenced the current wind speed, temperature, and humidity, making a few swift calculations. The distant target was a standard human silhouette steel plate, glinting faintly in the sunlight at the 1,300-meter mark. It was a target that, she noted, looked untouched, unscored for the day she settled into a prone position, her body sinking into the earth, becoming one with the terrain. The rifle felt natural, an extension of her arm, her eye. Her breathing deepened, slowing, becoming almost imperceptible. Her heart rate, which had been elevated by the walk, began to steady, then drop until it was a calm, rhythmic pulse. The world narrowed to the scope, to the target, to the almost imperceptible sway of the crosshairs in the gentle breeze. She didn't rush. She waited for the perfect moment, for the subtle shift in the wind, for her own body to align perfectly, her mind a blank slate save for the target. Hours of training, years of silent missions, all culminating in this single, uninvited act of defiance. The first shot was clean, a perfect hit. The steel target, though tiny at that distance, rang with the impact. She didn't move. She held her position, observing the impact, feeling the subtle recoil, analyzing the data. Another breath, another moment of absolute stillness, another perfect hit. 2 for 2. She paused, her eyes still glued to the scope, her mind calm and clear. This wasn't about proving herself to them, not really. It was about proving herself to herself, a quiet affirmation of her own truth. 3 perfect hits, all on the same target, all within a tight grouping that, at 1,300 meters, defied conventional expectations. The sound of the third impact hung in the air, a silent declaration of mastery. Scarlett slowly broke her position, her muscles fluid, uncomplaining. She carefully unloaded the rifle, placing it back into its case. She had used only 3 rounds. 3 rounds, to speak a truth no words could convey. As she stood, brushing dust from her fatigues, she heard the distant sound of a vehicle, a fast-approaching engine. She turned, her eyes scanning the horizon. A black government SUV, sleek and unmarked, was barreling down the dirt road towards the 1,300-meter range, kicking up a rooster tail of dust. It wasn't just any vehicle, it was a JSOC vehicle. She recognized the make, the tinted windows, the subtle antenna array. At the same time, back at the administrative building, Master Sergeant Dalton, still reeling from his discovery, had just concluded a hushed, intense phone call. His face was still pale, his brow furrowed in a deep, anxious frown. He had called his old contact, a high-ranking NCO he trusted within JSOC, and relayed his bizarre encounter, carefully describing the etching he had seen. The response had been immediate, urgent, and terrifyingly clear. "Are you sure about that name, Dalton? Omega Wind?" The voice on the other end had asked, their tone a mixture of disbelief and growing alarm. "I saw it with my own eyes," Dalton had insisted, his voice hushed. On Donner's personal M24, there had been a long, chilling silence. "Then stay where you are, Dalton. Do not approach her. Do not engage. Do not speak to anyone about this. We're sending someone." And then the line had gone dead. Just as Dalton was processing the sheer gravity of that command, a young private burst into the administrative office, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. Master Sergeant, you won't believe it! Someone just hit the 1,300-meter target 3 times, perfect grouping. No one's touched that all day. Dalton's blood ran cold. The 1,300-meter target, and Donner was stretching her legs with her rifle case. A terrifying realization dawned on him. She wasn't simply leaving. She was making a statement that, combined with the etching, painted a picture far grander and more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. He looked around wildly. "Where is she now?" "She's still out there, sir, on the range." Dalton didn't wait. He sprinted out of the administrative building, ignoring the bewildered glances of the other personnel. He needed to get to her, he needed to understand, and he needed to confirm the impossible. He arrived at the 1,300-meter range just as the black SUV screeched to a halt a few dozen yards from Scarlett. The driver's side door swung open, and a tall, impeccably dressed man in a crisp uniform emerged. Colonel Granger, a name that carried weight, a man whose reputation as a JSOC officer of the highest caliber was whispered with reverence. Dalton had only seen him in classified briefings, never in person, and he was here. For Scarlett Donner. Dalton skidded to a halt, his chest heaving, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. Scarlett stood calmly, her rifle case closed beside her, a picture of quiet composure. Granger, his face unreadable, was approaching her, his gaze intense. "Sergeant Donner." Granger's voice was deep, authoritative, yet held an underlying tone of respect that Dalton had never heard directed at a junior NCO. "It seems we have a situation." Scarlett simply nodded, her expression placid. "Colonel." Granger didn't waste time. He glanced at the rifle case, then back at Scarlett. "Master Sergeant Dalton, I presume?" His eyes flickered to Dalton, a brief, assessing glance that seemed to take in his pale face and agitated demeanor. "Sir!" Dalton snapped to attention, his voice tight. "Master Sergeant Dalton, reporting as ordered." "Sir! I saw the etching, sir," he blurted out, unable to contain the shock and revelation. Granger nodded slowly, a grim acknowledgement. "Yes, Master Sergeant, we are aware." He then turned his full attention back to Scarlett. "Sergeant Donner, Operation Omega Wind is a highly classified Level 5 Black Op. Its existence is officially deniable. The fact that a non-cleared individual has seen its identifier on your personal weapon is problematic." He paused, letting his words sink in. Dalton felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. Problematic. That was an understatement. This was a breach of national security. "However," Granger continued, his voice softening almost imperceptibly as he looked at Scarlett, "it seems the circumstances of its discovery were accidental. And perhaps serendipitous." He glanced at the 1,300-meter target, the 3 perfect hits clearly visible through his binoculars. "You still shoot, I see." "When necessary, sir," Scarlett replied, her voice calm. Granger nodded. "Indeed, necessary for the next generation, it seems." He turned back to Dalton, his expression now firm, commanding. "Master Sergeant Dalton, your assessment of Sergeant Donner was, shall we say, incomplete." "Sergeant Donner is not here to pass your course." Dalton braced himself, expecting a reprimand, an accusation. But Granger's next words hit him like a physical blow, a sudden, stunning revelation that shattered his entire understanding of the situation. "She's here," Colonel Granger stated, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "Because she is the reason your course exists. She's here to train the next generation of precision operatives." "Sergeant Scarlett Donner," he announced, his gaze sweeping from Dalton to the distant target and back to Scarlett, "is a deep-cover precision operative of the highest order. Her covert operational history is extensive and largely unprecedented." Dalton stood there, utterly speechless. His jaw dropped. The woman he had just dismissed, called not aggressive enough, was a deep cover operative. A legend whispered about in classified circles. The Omega Wind etching wasn't just a mission. It was a designation of her rank, her status, her unparalleled skill. The quiet demeanor he had seen as a weakness was in fact a crucial part of her operational identity, a ghost moving unseen, unheard, striking with surgical precision from the shadows. Her assignment here, Granger continued, his voice now lower, more confidential, was originally to observe, to assess the current curriculum, to identify potential candidates for other, more specialized programs. The incident with the etching, he gestured towards the rifle case, has simply accelerated her public integration into your program. Scarlett offered no reaction, no triumph, no "I told you so," just a quiet, almost serene acceptance of her new, true role. Dalton could only stare, his mind reeling. All of his preconceived notions, all of his judgments about Scarlett were not merely wrong, they were spectacularly, profoundly, humiliatingly off the mark. He had been so blind, so caught up in his own rigid definitions of what a sniper should be, that he had failed to recognize the true master standing right in front of him. Colonel Granger took a step closer to Scarlett, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching the corners of his lips. "Sergeant Donner, your operational status has been reassessed. You are no longer a candidate. Effective immediately, you are reassigned as a guest instructor for the Army Sniper Instructor course, reporting directly to me for overarching strategy and to Master Sergeant Dalton for daily logistical support and integration." He looked pointedly at Dalton. "Is that understood, Master Sergeant?" Dalton snapped out of his stupor. "Understood, Colonel. Perfectly understood, sir." His voice was still a little shaky, but the initial shock was giving way to a profound, almost reverent awe. Granger nodded, then turned back to Scarlett. "Welcome, Sergeant. It seems Fort Eden is about to learn what true precision looks like." Scarlett simply gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Her eyes, still the color of a winter sky, held a flicker of something new, not triumph, but a quiet anticipation. The uninvited shot had been fired, the truth had been revealed, and the next chapter of Fort Eden, and of Sergeant Scarlett Donner, was about to begin. The ghost had returned, not to leave, but to teach. The morning after Colonel Granger's unexpected decree hung heavy over Fort Eden's sniper training grounds. The news, like wildfire, had swept through the ranks, morphing from rumor to confirmed fact. Sergeant Scarlett Donner, the quiet candidate dismissed for lacking aggression, was now a guest instructor. The word guest barely masked the truth. She was a direct imposition from JSOC, a figure of authority whose presence superseded the established hierarchy. Master Sergeant Dalton, still reeling from the previous day's revelations, stood awkwardly beside the small, unassuming woman he had so confidently misjudged. His usual booming voice was subdued, his demeanor a strained mix of professional deference and lingering bewilderment. He had assembled the remaining sniper candidates, their faces a tableau of confusion, skepticism, and in some cases, outright mockery. Private Torres, an arrogant, broad-shouldered recruit with a perpetually sneering grin, stood at the front of the line, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed at Scarlett. "So this is our new instructor?" he muttered just loud enough for his comrades to hear, a thinly veiled insult laced in his tone. "Thought they said she got kicked out." A ripple of snickers went through a small group around him. Scarlett registered the whispers, the disrespectful glances, the barely concealed contempt. She offered no reaction. Her face remained a placid mask. This was not a challenge to be met with anger, but with demonstration. "All right, listen up!" Dalton's voice, though lacking its usual force, managed to cut through the murmurs. He cleared his throat. "As you've undoubtedly heard, Sergeant Donner will be assisting with your instruction for the remainder of the course." He paused, a visible struggle to maintain his authority. "She comes to us with unique experience, You will treat her with the respect due to any instructor." His eyes flickered to Torres, a warning in their depths. Torres, however, remained unfazed, a smirk playing on his lips. He believed Scarlett was a token gesture, a political appointment, certainly not a genuine expert. He intended to make her time here as uncomfortable as possible. Scarlett stepped forward, her movements so fluid and quiet it seemed she simply materialized. Her presence, though physically slight, commanded an unexpected stillness. She spoke, her voice low, almost conversational, yet it carried an undeniable authority that silenced even Torres. "Good morning, candidates," she began, her gaze sweeping over each face, lingering for a fraction of a second on Torres. "My name is Sergeant Donner. My lessons will focus on the fundamentals you often overlook, the unseen elements, the internal landscape." Torres snorted dismissively. "The internal what, Sergeant? We're here to learn how to put rounds on target, not meditate." A few more snickers erupted. Dalton's face reddened, but Scarlett held up a hand, a subtle gesture that stopped him from intervening. She simply looked at Torres, her winter sky eyes holding an ancient knowing quality. "Putting rounds on target, Private Torres," Scarlett replied, her voice still calm, "is often a consequence of mastering the internal. Consider your breath. It is the first uncontrolled variable in any shot." She then began her first lesson, not on marksmanship, but on breath control. She guided them through exercises that seemed almost rudimentary, slow, diaphragmatic breathing, holding the breath at the top and bottom of the inhale, exhaling in precise, measured counts. The recruits fidgeted, bored. Torres openly rolled his eyes. "Why are we doing this, Sergeant?" Torres demanded, unable to contain his impatience. "This is basic infantry stuff." "Because, Private," Scarlett explained, her patience unwavering under stress, "your breathing accelerates, your heart rate rises, your body tenses. Every one of those factors degrades your stability, your focus, your ability to make a clean break on the trigger. A sniper does not merely aim with their eye, they aim with their entire being. And your being is controlled by your breath." She moved on to heart rate manipulation. She taught them techniques for lowering their pulse even under exertion. She explained how adrenaline, while sharpening senses, could also introduce microtremors, blurred vision, and distorted perception of time. She demonstrated simple isometric exercises, deep relaxation techniques, and mental visualization practices that seemed utterly foreign to the aggressive training they were accustomed to. The recruits, including Torres, found these lessons frustrating, almost insulting to their warrior ethos. "This is all touchy-feely nonsense," Torres complained loudly to a buddy. "We're soldiers, not yogis." Scarlett simply ignored him, moving with quiet determination. Her lessons continued with extreme patience. She spoke of the importance of waiting, not just for the perfect shot, but for the perfect moment in the environment. She described how subtle shifts in wind patterns could be predicted by observing dust, heat mirages, even the movement of insects. She spoke of the Zen-like focus required to sit motionless for hours, observing, absorbing, becoming one with the landscape. "Your patience," she told them, her voice almost a whisper, "is a weapon. It allows you to see what others miss, to become invisible where others are exposed, to take a shot when no one believes a shot is possible." The recruits, however, remained largely unconvinced. They yearned for the excitement of live-fire drills, for the roar of the range, for the tangible feedback of hitting targets. Scarlett's lessons felt abstract, esoteric, and frankly, boring. The true turning point came during a concealment and observation exercise. The instructors, including Dalton, had set up a complex scenario in a sprawling wooded section of the base. Each candidate was given a sector to infiltrate, find a hidden observation post, and then identify 5 specific targets marked on a map, reporting their positions via radio. The exercise was designed to test their stealth, their camouflage skills, and their ability to operate unnoticed. For this particular exercise, Scarlett had elected not to participate as an observer or a demonstrator. She simply disappeared before the exercise began, telling Dalton she would be evaluating from the field. Dalton, still unsure how to manage her, had simply nodded, albeit with a nervous twitch. Hours later, the exercise was nearing its end. Dalton, along with a few other instructors, moved through the woods, meticulously checking on the candidates, assessing their positions, looking for flaws in their concealment. They were experts at this. Few candidates managed to evade their keen eyes for long. They found Private Torres surprisingly well camouflaged, nestled in a dense thicket of bushes. Dalton approached quietly, his eyes scanning for any giveaway. Torres, proud of his efforts, remained utterly still, convinced he was invisible. Dalton knelt beside him. "Good work, Torres," he whispered, "a rare compliment. You've chosen a strong position. Good cover, good concealment. I almost missed you." Torres allowed himself a small, self-satisfied smirk. "Thank you, Master Sergeant. I picked a spot with optimal visual lines to all targets and maximum concealment from the approach routes." "Indeed," Dalton agreed. "Very well done." He then paused, his brow furrowing slightly. "Just one thing, Torres." Torres leaned in, eager for further praise. "Sir? You missed something." Dalton pointed to a barely visible, almost imperceptible disturbance in the leaves just a few yards from Torres's position, at eye level. It was so subtle, so perfectly integrated into the background, that it was nearly impossible to discern. "Look closer." Torres peered intently. "Nothing, just leaves." "Sir, I don't see anything." Just then, a voice, calm and clear, emerged from the very spot Dalton had indicated. "You chose based on what you could see. I chose based on who couldn't see me." Torres jumped, startled, his heart pounding. Dalton almost stumbled back in shock. From the almost invisible patch of foliage, Scarlett Donner slowly, almost magically emerged. She hadn't moved an inch, hadn't made a sound. She had simply been there, observing them. Her camouflage was so absolute, her stillness so profound, that she had literally been a ghost within their midst, watching Torres's every move, listening to their conversation. She was in full ghillie suit, but unlike the bulky, almost comical ones the recruits struggled with, hers was a masterpiece of natural integration. Leaves, twigs, and local vegetation had been meticulously woven into the fabric, creating a seamless extension of the forest floor. Her face was expertly camouflaged, her eyes the only discernible features, glinting with quiet intensity. Torres stared at her, his jaw slack. The smug self-satisfaction on his face vanished, replaced by a mixture of shock and dawning humiliation. She had been right there, all along. He had been so confident, so proud of his own concealment, and she had been within spitting distance, utterly invisible. Scarlett knelt, her movements as fluid as smoke. Your position, private, while offering good lines of sight, also revealed your presence to anyone approaching from this angle. She pointed to a subtle rise in the ground, an almost imperceptible undulation that, from her perspective, offered a clear, unobstructed view of Torres. Your visual lines worked both ways. My position, she gestured around her, offered limited visual lines out, but absolute concealment in. She then explained in her quiet, methodical way how she had anticipated their approach, how she had chosen her spot not for what she could see, but for what she couldn't be seen by. She spoke of reading the subtle shifts in the wind, the direction of sunlight, the natural paths of animals, all to become an indistinguishable part of the environment. She had relied on sound, on smell, on instinct to understand their positions while remaining completely undetected herself. "You chose based on what you could see," she reiterated, her voice soft but firm, her eyes fixed on Torres. "I chose based on who couldn't see me. The truly successful sniper is not merely a shooter. They are a phantom, a part of the terrain. The moment you are seen, your advantage is compromised." Dalton, who had been listening intently, felt a profound shift within him. He had always prided himself on his fieldcraft, on his ability to spot hidden targets. But Scarlett had just demonstrated a level of mastery that transcended anything he had ever witnessed. It wasn't just about camouflaging yourself, it was about becoming the environment itself. The silence that followed was different from the earlier snickers and mockery. This was a silence of genuine awe, of deep introspection. Torres, for the first time, looked truly humbled. The arrogance had been wiped from his face, replaced by a dazed respect. He had scoffed at her touchy-feely lessons, yet here she was, demonstrating their brutal, undeniable efficacy. Scarlett rose, as silently as she had appeared. "Return to your barracks," she instructed the now silent recruits. "Reflect on today's exercise. Think not only about what you saw, but what you failed to see. My next lesson will be on the art of patience, not just in waiting for the shot, but in waiting to be truly unseen." As the recruits, including a noticeably subdued Torres, began to move, Dalton approached Scarlett, his face etched with a newfound respect. "Sergeant Donner," he began, his voice rough with emotion, I apologize. I had no idea. Your methods, they're revolutionary." Scarlett simply nodded. "They are merely efficient, Master Sergeant. The battlefield does not reward overt displays, it rewards results, and results often come from patience and invisibility." She glanced towards the now distant figures of the recruits. They will learn, in time. The ghost had taught her first lesson, and for the first time the candidates of Fort Eden, and especially Private Torres, began to realize that their quiet, unassuming instructor was not just unique. She was a living, breathing testament to a forgotten, more profound art of the sniper. The mockery had ended, the true teaching had begun. The atmosphere at Fort Eden had undergone a palpable shift. The open skepticism and thinly veiled disdain that had greeted Sergeant Scarlett Donner's initial arrival had evaporated, replaced by a cautious, then rapidly growing respect. The concealment exercise had been a brutal, undeniable demonstration of her unparalleled skill, a living embodiment of the unseen principles she championed. Private Torres, once her most vocal detractor, was now a quiet, almost fervent follower, his arrogance replaced by an earnest desire to absorb every word, every nuance of her instruction. Scarlett's lessons continued, moving beyond the purely physical aspects of breath control and heart rate manipulation. She delved into the psychological warfare of patience, the profound mental fortitude required to operate in extreme isolation under immense pressure. She spoke of the importance of absolute self-reliance, the ability to make life or death decisions without external validation, to trust one's instincts above all else. One afternoon, during a theoretical session in a dimly lit classroom, Scarlett began to open up about her past missions. She spoke not with bravado, but with a detached, analytical precision, almost as if recounting historical events rather than personal experiences. She described a world far removed from the structured, predictable environment of Fort Eden, a world of shadows, denied operations, and impossible odds. The recruits sat spellbound, leaning forward, their usual fidgeting forgotten. Master Sergeant Dalton, now always present for her sessions, listened with an almost reverent intensity, taking notes as diligently as any recruit. He was witnessing history, or rather, the unclassified echoes of it. "There was one mission," Scarlett began, her voice low, almost a whisper, yet it filled the room. In the Hindu Kush. High altitude. The target was a high-value individual, deeply entrenched, heavily guarded. My observation post was on a ridgeline, exposed, but with the only viable shot. She paused, her gaze distant, lost in the memory. The intel was fluid. The target schedule shifted constantly. I needed a sustained presence. 5 days. That's what it took for the perfect window to align. A recruit shifted, clearing his throat. 5 days, Sergeant? In the Hindu Kush? Scarlett nodded. Winter conditions. Below freezing, we encountered an unexpected obstacle during insertion. A fall. My arm sustained a compound fracture. She held up her left arm, pointing to a faint, barely visible scar near her elbow. It was manageable, but it meant no outside support, no resupply. I was alone. A collective gasp went through the room. No one moved. The air was thick with tension. For 5 days, she continued, her voice unwavering, I maintained my hide. No food, no water, just melted snow when I could get it. The pain was a constant companion, a distraction to be managed, not acknowledged. But the shot, Sergeant? Torres asked, his voice hushed, reverent. Did you take it? Scarlett's eyes met his, a flicker of something almost imperceptible passing between them. The window opened on the 5th day, just after dawn, the target illuminated perfectly by the rising sun, a single clean shot, over 1,800 meters. She paused, letting the weight of the statement hang in the air. 1,800 meters, with a broken arm, after 5 days of starvation and exposure. It was beyond the realm of anything they had ever conceived. Did you feel anything, Sergeant? Another recruit, Private Jensen, asked, his voice barely audible. After all that? Scarlett's expression remained neutral. Satisfaction that the mission was completed, that the precision was absolute. Emotions are a luxury a sniper cannot afford in that moment. They cloud judgment. They betray focus. The recruits were silent, utterly awestruck. The image of this quiet woman, enduring such unimaginable hardship, executing a perfect shot under such conditions, cemented her legend in their minds. The concept of killer instinct had been entirely redefined. It wasn't about aggression, it was about an almost superhuman endurance, focus, and unwavering commitment to the objective. From that day forward, the recruits' respect for Scarlett bordered on reverence. They no longer questioned her methods. They devoured her lessons, eagerly anticipating her next field demonstration, her next quiet revelation. Torres, in particular, became her shadow, diligently practicing the breath control, the stillness, the almost meditative patience she advocated. His scores on the range, once merely competent, began to climb, demonstrating a newfound consistency and precision. It was during this period that Scarlett began to notice a particular promise in one of the young female trainees, Private Riley. Riley was quiet, almost as reserved as Scarlett herself. She wasn't the loudest, the most outwardly confident, but her focus was unwavering, her movements precise and economical. She listened intently during Scarlett's lectures, her eyes absorbing every detail. During field exercises, Riley displayed an uncanny knack for concealment, a natural ability to blend into her surroundings that reminded Scarlett of her own early days. One afternoon, during a stalking drill, Scarlett observed Riley from a hidden vantage point. Riley moved with an almost ethereal grace, her footsteps silent, her body low to the ground, her camouflage impeccable. She flowed through the undergrowth like a whisper, her eyes constantly scanning, her senses attuned to every nuance of the environment. She wasn't just performing the drill, she was embodying the spirit of the ghost. Later that day, as the recruits were cleaning their gear, Scarlett approached Riley. "Private Riley," she said, her voice soft. Riley looked up, surprised, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "Sergeant, your performance today," Scarlett began, her eyes unwavering. "It was exceptional. Your movement, your field craft. You have a natural aptitude." Riley's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise and quiet pleasure in them. "Thank you, Sergeant. You possess a quality many others lack," Scarlett continued, her gaze assessing. "Patience and a quiet strength. You don't seek attention, but you absorb everything. That is a rare and valuable trait for a precision operative." Riley simply nodded, her expression earnest. Scarlett leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. "Keep working on your internal discipline, your ability to control your breath, your heart rate, your thoughts. That is where true power lies, and pay attention to the details others ignore, the subtle shifts in the wind, the direction of shadows, the patterns of animal life. The environment speaks to those who listen." Riley listened intently, her eyes fixed on Scarlett, absorbing every word. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. Scarlett saw in Riley a reflection of her younger self, a glimpse of a potential legacy. This wasn't just about training another sniper, it was about nurturing a successor, someone who could carry the torch of silent, precise operations into the next generation. The Army Sniper Instructor course, designed to produce instructors, was now, ironically, forging the next deep cover operative, trained by the Ghost herself. The instructors, led by Master Sergeant Dalton, noticed the subtle shift in Scarlett's focus, the quiet mentorship she was extending to Private Riley. Dalton, recognizing the profound impact Scarlett was having, wisely stepped back, allowing her the freedom to shape the curriculum and nurture talent as she saw fit. He had learned his lesson. This wasn't about following a manual, it was about understanding a philosophy, a way of being. The transformation within the course was remarkable. The once boisterous, overtly aggressive candidates had become more introspective, more patient. The crack of rifles on the range was still present, but it was accompanied by longer periods of silent observation, of meticulous setup, of thoughtful reflection. Scarlett had not just taught them how to shoot, she had taught them how to think, how to be. She was not merely an instructor, she was a catalyst, reshaping the very definition of a sniper at Fort Eden. The Ghost was not only teaching, she was cultivating a new generation of unseen operatives, ensuring her unique doctrine would live on. The transformation at Fort Eden under Sergeant Scarlett Donner's unofficial tutelage was profound. The recruits, once a boisterous collection of ambitious marksmen, were now imbued with a quiet intensity, their movements more deliberate, their focus sharper. Master Sergeant Dalton, having fully embraced Scarlett's unconventional methods, acted as her staunch advocate, ensuring she had the autonomy to shape the curriculum as she saw fit. The program, once rigid, now flowed with a newfound flexibility, adapting to Scarlett's unique insights. One crisp autumn morning, as Scarlett was conducting a detailed lecture on urban concealment techniques, an urgent summons arrived from Colonel Granger. It was not a request, but a direct order. She was to report to his office immediately. Scarlett arrived at Granger's office, a sterile, highly secure space within the Fort Eden Command Center. Granger sat behind his large, uncluttered desk, his expression serious. "Sergeant Donner," Granger began, "without preamble, we have an urgent situation. A Special Forces unit, Echo Company, out of Fort Apollo, is deploying to a mountainous, high-altitude region in 2 weeks. Extremely challenging terrain. They're struggling with long-range engagement parameters in that environment. They need an edge. Now, Fort Apollo was renowned for its elite special forces training, particularly for mountain warfare. The idea that they needed external assistance, especially from a guest instructor from a sniper school, was telling. It underscored the severity of their problem. My contacts there, Granger continued, his gaze sharp, indicate their current sniper support is hitting a wall at around 1,500 meters consistently. They need to reliably extend that range. accurately beyond 2,000 meters, sometimes more in highly variable conditions. Our intel suggests the enemy has adopted new tactics that exploit this range gap. Scarlett nodded, processing the information. 2,000 meters in mountain terrain was a formidable challenge. It wasn't just about the rifle, it was about understanding atmospheric conditions, wind currents, Coriolis effect, and managing physical exertion at altitude. "Your reputation, Sergeant," Granger stated, a rare flicker of something akin to admiration in his eyes, "has preceded you. Echo Company's commander, Colonel Hayes, specifically requested a ghost. He's aware of your operational history, or at least the rumors of it." Scarlett remained impassive. "What is the specific request, Colonel?" "A 3-day consultation," Granger explained. "You are to deploy to Fort Apollo immediately. Your mission is to provide advanced long-range shooting training, specifically tailored for extreme mountainous terrain and extended ranges. You will work directly with their sniper teams and any other operators designated by Colonel Hayes." He paused, his gaze fixed on her. "You have full autonomy. Whatever you need to accomplish this, it's yours." Scarlett simply nodded. "Understood, Colonel." Within hours, Scarlett was on a military transport plane, her personal M24 rifle case secured beside her. The flight to Fort Apollo was short but punctuated by the constant hum of the engines, giving her time to mentally prepare for the unique challenges ahead. Special Forces operators were a different breed from the Fort Eden recruits. They were hardened veterans, often with multiple combat tours, possessing a deep-seated pride in their abilities. Her methods, so effective at Fort Eden, might face a new, perhaps more stubborn form of skepticism. Upon arrival at Fort Apollo, Scarlett was met by Major Ellis, Echo Company's executive officer, a man with a grizzled beard and eyes that had seen too much. He was polite, professional, but his initial demeanor betrayed a subtle weariness, a hint of "we've tried everything" resignation. "Sergeant Donner," Ellis greeted, offering a curt nod. "Welcome to Fort Apollo. Colonel Hayes is tied up, but he asked me to ensure you have everything you need. The range is prepped for you. Our top sniper teams are awaiting your instruction." Scarlett simply replied, "Lead the way, Major." The next morning, Scarlett found herself on a high-altitude firing range, surrounded by a dozen elite Special Forces operators. These were men and women who had honed their craft in the crucible of combat, their uniforms bearing numerous patches of distinguished service. They stood tall, their rifles slung, their expressions a mixture of professional curiosity and underlying skepticism. They had heard the rumors of the ghost, but seeing a slight, quiet woman from a training school challenged their expectations. Sergeant First Class Miller, the head of Echo Company's sniper section, a burly man with a reputation for bluntness, stepped forward. "Sergeant Donner," he stated, his voice gruff, "we've been told you can help us with our long-range problem. We're open to new techniques, but frankly, we've tried it all. What exactly do you bring to the table that we don't already know?" Scarlett met his gaze unflinching. "I bring a different perspective, Sergeant First Class. Your current techniques are effective for known variables. I will show you how to dominate the unknown variables." She didn't start with firing. Instead, she led them to a high vantage point overlooking a vast, complex, mountainous landscape. She spent hours simply observing. She spoke of how the wind behaved differently in canyons and across open ridges, how thermal updrafts created by heated rock faces could throw off a shot by hundreds of meters, how the subtle differences in air density at varying altitudes affected bullet trajectory. She pointed out specific rock formations, seemingly innocuous slopes, and subtle vegetation changes, explaining how each could act as a wind tunnel, a thermal barrier, or a natural sound dampener. The operators, initially impatient, gradually began to lean in, their skepticism giving way to intrigued surprise. These were observations they had never considered, nuances they had simply dismissed as unpredictable. Scarlett was identifying patterns in the chaos. "The mountain," she explained, her voice quiet, "is a living entity. It breathes. It shifts. You must learn its language. Listen to the wind, not just feel it. Watch the dust, the leaves, the behavior of wildlife. Each tells a story about the air currents, the atmospheric pressure, the temperature changes. These are your true ballistic calculators." The next day, she put theory into practice. She chose a target at 2,200 meters, a small rock formation on a distant ridge, a range they considered borderline impossible for consistent hits. "We will not shoot for hours," she announced. "We will wait." The operators exchanged baffled glances. They were used to rapid-fire drills, immediate feedback. Scarlett made them set up their rifles, then simply observe. For 3 hours she made them watch the target, watch the air, watch the subtle play of light and shadow. She instructed them to feel the micro-shifts in the breeze on their skin, to mentally track the faint, unseen currents. "Now," she finally said, her voice cutting through the stillness. "Observe the heat mirage above the rock face. Watch the precise moment it shimmers and distorts. That is your window. That is when the air is momentarily stable enough for your round to pass through cleanly." She had each sniper take a single shot, one at a time, precisely when she called out the moment. And, to their astonishment, round after round impacted the distant rock, a consistent ping echoing across the valley. Not every shot was a bullseye, but the consistency at that extreme range under such conditions was unprecedented for them. Sergeant First Class Miller, his face a mixture of shock and dawning realization, walked to Scarlett. "Sergeant," he said, his voice laced with uncharacteristic humility, "we've never been able to get that kind of consistency at that range, not even close." "You were fighting the mountain," Scarlett replied simply. "I taught you how to listen to it." Over the next 2 days, Scarlett intensified the training. She pushed them beyond their physical and mental limits, not with brute force, but with extreme precision. She taught them advanced techniques for calculating Coriolis effect for rounds traveling over such vast distances, for reading the subtle drift of mirage lines, for making split-second corrections for sudden gusts of wind. She introduced them to specialized breathing techniques that allowed them to lower their heart rate, even after a strenuous uphill climb, ensuring a steady shot immediately upon reaching their firing position. She even revealed a technique she called harmonic alignment, a method of tuning into the subtle vibrations of their rifle, their body, and the environment itself to achieve a state of absolute equilibrium before the shot. It sounded mystical, almost impossible, but when she demonstrated it, the results were undeniable. By the end of the 3 days, the Special Forces operators, once skeptical and proud, were utterly convinced. They had seen with their own eyes their capabilities extended beyond what they believed possible. They had been taught not just new methods, but an entirely new philosophy of long-range engagement. Sergeant Donner, Colonel Hayes, a man rarely given to effusive praise, told her on her final afternoon, "You have given my teams an invaluable advantage. You have literally expanded their operational envelope. What you've taught them, Sergeant, isn't in any textbook. It's a living art." Even the gruff Sergeant First Class Miller approached her, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "Sergeant Donner," he said, extending a hand, "I was wrong, completely wrong. You taught us what books never could. You taught us to see the mountain, not just to shoot across it. Thank you." Scarlett simply nodded, accepting their gratitude with her usual quiet grace. She had given them the tools, but the true learning, she knew, would come in the crucible of real-world operations. As she boarded the return transport, the hum of the engines a familiar lullaby, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The ghost had delivered her message. Her doctrine, born in the shadows, was now taking root in the elite units, preparing them for the battles to come. The success of Sergeant Scarlett Donner's consultation at Fort Apollo sent ripples throughout the higher echelons of the military. Whispers of the ghost and her revolutionary techniques reached the ears of the most powerful figures, compelling them to take notice. The reports from Colonel Hayes at Fort Apollo were unequivocal. Scarlett's methods had dramatically enhanced their long-range capabilities, pushing beyond conventional limits in the most challenging terrain. This wasn't just an improvement, it was a paradigm shift. Back at Fort Eden, the Army Sniper Instructor course had been completely transformed. What was once a rigid, by-the-book curriculum was now fluid, incorporating Scarlett's core tenets of breath control, heart rate manipulation, extreme patience, and environmental awareness. Master Sergeant Dalton, once her dismissive instructor, was now her most ardent champion, integrating her philosophy into every aspect of the training. Private Torres and Private Riley, along with the rest of their cohort, displayed remarkable progress, their precision and fieldcraft reaching unprecedented levels. The culmination of this transformation came with the announcement of a high-level visit. The Commandant of the Army, General Marcus Thorne, a man whose decisions shaped the future of the entire service, was coming to Fort Eden to observe the new training methods personally. It was an unprecedented move, a clear indicator of the gravity with which her impact was being viewed. The day of the Commandant's visit dawned clear and crisp. The entire base was abuzz with preparation, but on the sniper range, a quiet tension hung in the air. Scarlett, ever composed, showed no outward signs of nervousness. She had been preparing for this demonstration for weeks, selecting a scenario that would showcase the full spectrum of her doctrine. General Thorne arrived in a convoy of black sedans, his entourage of high-ranking officers in tow. He was a formidable figure, with a sharp, intelligent gaze that missed nothing. Colonel Granger, present to provide context and support, stood beside him, a rare look of anticipation on his face. Master Sergeant Dalton stood rigidly at attention, ready to explain the new curriculum. Master Sergeant Dalton, General Thorne's voice was deep, authoritative. Colonel Granger has provided compelling reports, but I need to see it for myself. Show me what has changed here. Dalton saluted. Yes, sir. General, we will begin with a demonstration by Sergeant Scarlett Donner. She will exemplify the core principles of our new training doctrine. Scarlett stepped forward, her movement as quiet and unassuming as ever. She saluted the general. Sergeant Donner, sir. Welcome to Fort Eden. General Thorne's gaze was sharp, assessing. He had read her classified file, of course, the parts that were permissible. He knew of Operation Omega Wind and the hushed legends surrounding her. But seeing the quiet woman in person, so unassuming, contrasted starkly with the extraordinary reputation. Sergeant, Thorne stated, I'm told your methods are unconventional. Show me what unconventional can achieve. Scarlett nodded. Sir, today's demonstration will be a single shot, a mile, with a calculated wind delay to the second. A ripple of murmurs went through the general's staff. A mile shot, approximately 1,600 meters, was already challenging. Adding a calculated wind delay, accounting for a moving target or a precise window, elevated it to a different level of mastery. Scarlett led them to a newly established range, a vast, open expanse. At exactly 1 mile, a small stationary steel target, designed to simulate a specific vulnerability on a vehicle, had been placed. The wind was a variable crosswind, gusting intermittently, making the shot even more complex. She had her M24 set up. She didn't rush. She talked the general and his staff through her process, explaining each step with calm precision. She spoke of atmosphere atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and the subtle interplay of various wind currents. She articulated how her breathing techniques allowed her to achieve absolute stillness, how her internal heart rate manipulation eliminated micro-tremors. The wind, she explained, her gaze fixed on the distant target through her spotting scope, is not a constant. It shifts, it eddies. The challenge is not to overcome it, but to understand its momentary truth, to predict its next breath, and to integrate that prediction into the trajectory of the round. She then explained the concept of wind delay, a technique for deliberately holding the shot until a precise, anticipated lull or shift in the wind, releasing the round at the exact microsecond the atmospheric conditions were optimal for that specific target. This wasn't guesswork, it was a complex real-time calculation, integrating data from her instruments with her honed intuition and environmental observation. My calculation, she stated, her voice even, indicates an optimal window in 45 seconds, lasting for exactly 3.2 seconds. The wind will momentarily drop to 4 miles per hour from the north-northwest, allowing for a precise point of impact. The officers watched, fascinated. General Thorne stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Scarlett, absorbing every detail of her methodical preparation. Scarlett settled into her prone position. Her body became utterly still, a statue of concentration. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm. Her eyes, through the scope, were locked onto the distant target, waiting. 45 seconds ticked by. The wind seemed to howl around them. Then, almost miraculously, it began to die down, just as Scarlett had predicted. The shot was fired. The sound of the impact echoed across the range a full 2 seconds later. A perfect hit. The small steel target at a mile rang with the clean, undeniable impact. A collective sigh of astonishment rippled through the observing officers. General Thorne's expression, usually stern, softened into a look of profound admiration. He had witnessed precision elevated to an art form, a blend of science, intuition, and absolute mastery. Scarlett slowly rose from her position, her movements as fluid and unhurried as ever. She looked at the general. General Thorne approached her, his gaze unwavering. "Sergeant Donner," he said, his voice laced with uncharacteristic awe. "That was an extraordinary demonstration, beyond anything I've witnessed in my career." He paused, then turned to his staff. "This," he announced, his voice ringing with conviction, "is the future of precision engagement. Sergeant Donner's training protocol will be adopted globally across all Army sniper schools immediately." A murmur of approval went through his staff. Dalton, standing a few feet away, swelled with pride. This was an endorsement of monumental proportions, a validation of everything he had learned from Scarlett. General Thorne turned back to Scarlett. "Sergeant, your contribution to our capabilities is immense. The Army owes you a debt of gratitude. Is there anything you require? Any recognition, any promotion you desire?" Scarlett's expression remained calm, humble. "General, with all due respect, legends are for posters. I just do the job. My only requirement is that the doctrine is implemented with the same integrity and precision with which it was developed." Thorne smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Understood, Sergeant," and commendably stated. He then turned to Dalton. "Master Sergeant, ensure this happens. Sergeant Donner will oversee the initial implementation, working directly with my office." Later that afternoon, after the general and his entourage had departed, leaving behind a flurry of urgent directives, Scarlett stood by the firing range, observing a group of new recruits practicing their breathing exercises. Torres approached her, his face thoughtful. "Sergeant," Torres began, his voice soft, "after everything you've done, all you've accomplished, why do you never seek recognition? Why do you always say legends are for posters?" Scarlett looked at him, her eyes holding an ancient wisdom. "Because, Private," she replied, her voice almost a whisper, "the best never need to speak. They just complete the mission. Their work, their impact, speaks for itself. True mastery is silent. It does not demand attention. It commands respect through undeniable results." She turned her gaze back to the recruits, their quiet movements a testament to her influence. Recognition fades, medals gather dust. But the mission is eternal, and the ability to execute it perfectly, consistently, silently, that is the only legacy that matters. Torres nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He understood now. The ghost had not only taught him how to shoot, she had taught him how to be. A new doctrine had been born, not just for sniper schools, but for a new generation of unseen operatives, forever changed by the silent strength and lethal precision of Sergeant Scarlett Donner. The mission would continue in the shadows, carried forward by those who now understood that true power lay in the art of being invisible. And so we bring to a close the remarkable journey of Sergeant Scarlett Donner, the ghost of Fort Eden. From the quiet dismissal that sought to diminish her, to the earth-shattering revelation of her true identity, Scarlett redefined what it means to be a precision operative. She wasn't loud, she wasn't ostentatious, but her silence spoke volumes. Her precision echoed across continents, and her unwavering dedication to the mission forged a legacy that will resonate through generations of elite soldiers. We witnessed how her seemingly simple lessons on breath, on patience, on the unseen dance of environmental variables transformed a skeptical training ground into a crucible of true mastery. Her ability to become one with the terrain, to strike from impossible distances, and to cultivate a new breed of silent professionals like Private Torres and Private Riley proved that the most profound strength often lies not in aggression, but in an almost spiritual control. Her mission at Fort Apollo, taking hardened Special Forces operators beyond their perceived limits, wasn't just about hitting targets at 2,000 meters. It was about teaching them to listen to the whisper of the mountain, to read the unseen language of the wind. She taught them that the most powerful tools are often those already within us, waiting to be honed, perfected, and unleashed with absolute precision. And ultimately, her quiet defiance culminated in a global endorsement from the highest echelons of the army. Sergeant Scarlett Donner, the woman who was told she wasn't aggressive enough, now stands as the architect of a new doctrine, a testament to the fact that true excellence doesn't seek validation, it commands it through undeniable results. Her humble refusal of accolades, her belief that legends are for posters, encapsulates the very essence of the quiet professional, those who just do the job, and in doing so, leave an indelible mark on the world, often from the deepest shadows. What part of Scarlett's story resonated most with you? Was it her unparalleled skill, her unwavering patience, or her quiet humility in the face of immense achievement? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We at Veteran Biker are always eager to hear your perspectives and insights. If you found inspiration in Scarlett's journey, if you believe in the power of quiet determination and unparalleled skill, then make sure you hit that like button and, more importantly, subscribe to the Veteran Biker channel. Join our growing community as we continue to explore tales of extraordinary courage, hidden heroes, and the profound impact of those who dedicate their lives to mastering their craft. And before you go, don't miss our other compelling stories. Check out the videos appearing on your screen now for more incredible narratives of resilience, skill, and the indomitable human spirit. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next mission.